Long time no see. So I figured, what better way to come back than to talk about my worst albums of the year, my top 10 worst albums of the year. I will be doing my top 20 best albums as well, but let's get the garbage out of the way before we get to something a little bit more positive. So, I am not going to write some of these full album titles fully because some of them are a little bit long and I don't want to spend like 2 minutes writing out something. Not to mention, it gives me the possibility of writing something wrong. So, number 10, and we're not going to try to be here forever talking about some really bad projects. But let's start off with number 10, which is X Ambassadors with Townie. Didn't write a review or didn't do a video review for this project, but I followed X Ambassadors for a decent amount, especially when it came to their debut project VHS. I'm not sure if that was 2015 or 2014, but I liked the sound at the time, although it was quite derivative. It was very simple and it was very commercial friendly. So it didn't really stick with me too much longer after I discovered them. So, out of curiosity, I jumped back in with this new record, Townie. And to say from 2015 to 2024, there has been no artistic progression, in my opinion, whatsoever with this band. It's the same kind of songs that you would hear on VHS, especially songs like Renegade, and you do get a little bit more stripped back moments as well. And some moments on this album do feel rather nice and a little bit of a change of pace, but overall, it just feels like we have gone down this road before. And I think the biggest problem I have with this project is just I call nostalgia bait lyricism, where it brings up a specific moment from the singer's childhood or something oddly specific that tries to drum up emotion into the listener. But what I find it does is that it creates a wall between the artist and the listener to where everything just falls flat and it just oftentimes can fall into some really corny writing and some very corny territory. So Townie, I do hope that X Ambassadors does kind of innovate their sound at least a little bit because I just really feel like nothing has changed ever since I discovered them all the way back in 2015. So now we jump to number 9, and I'm just gonna put the artist name here for this one, and it is Joyner Lucas with "Not Now, I'm Busy." This album definitely reminds me of ADHD from a couple of years ago, where I have the exact same problems. But at least with ADHD, I felt like there was some kind of overarching concept. With this album, I feel like that is kind of void from this project. I feel like the technical rapping of Joyner Lucas is there, but the lyrics I find are just something that I cannot connect to whatsoever. And it's just empty platitudes of bravado and flexing, which you get across multiple rap projects. It's not to say that like it's an uncommon thing or anything like that. It is very common. But I feel like the way with Joyner Lucas, the way that he portrays it, it just really doesn't interest me whatsoever. And sure, you can rap fast and you have a good technical ability at rapping, but you need to have the charisma and also decent writing to really capture my full attention. And I feel like Not Now I'm Busy really doesn't do that for me whatsoever across the entire runtime. So then we jump to number 8, and I feel like this album, and I guess I'm going to be jumping back and forth for colors. I feel like this album is going to show up in a lot of people's lists, and that's Y2K from Ice Spice. Another example where the debut project, I know the EP came out, but I was at least expecting something a little bit different, but Y2K is very much the same thing with just boring, derivative, unoriginal trap beats. Some really poor and lackluster writing, especially with a gravitation and interest towards poop bars. It's getting so prevalent and so common that I'm starting to wonder if there is a problem there. But overall, I think this project and Ice Spice in general, this is kind of the crest of the wave, and I think we have gone down incredibly far from where we came. There was Deluxe that just came out, I think, a week ago, and I haven't really heard much of conversation about it besides, I think, DaBaby and NLE Chopper features on the project. But I think the Ice Spice era and the Ice Spice time is done. And not to say that I was expecting some crazy innovative album from Ice Spice, but I was at least expecting something a little bit more, and I really didn't get that at all. It feels like, honestly, that we've gone backwards just a little bit with the project. So, number 7, I'll just put the artist title for this one, and that's Four Bats with Mama, You Made a Star. This is a mixtape, but it is a mixtape of ideas, not fully cohesive songs. As I said in my video covering this project, it really reminds me of Designer's Project New English, where it's just a mixtape of ideas, and that's pretty much it. And sure, some of those ideas may form into interesting songs, but when you just get the ideas part of it, you just get an incredible disconnection from the songs, and they really don't capture much of an attention for me at all. You do get some of those moments that you've seen on YouTube and trends and all that, those little 10 to 15 snippets that are catchy and do kind of show that there's an idea that's being formed. But with this project, it doesn't fully realize those concepts, and these songs are just incredibly short, and they just don't offer really anything that's interesting as of a payoff. So, Four Bats with Mama, You Made a Star. Number 6 is kind of a mix of a bunch, and I'm just going to put Rage here. And it's basically Rage albums that are not Yeat. I don't know if Yeat kind of falls into Rage much anymore, especially with 2093 that kind of pushed the envelope a little bit for him, even though Lifestyle may fall into the Rage category. But I'm talking about artists like Destroy Lonely with Love Lasts Forever, an incredibly bloated and sounding unfinished when it comes to the mixing department kind of project. And then you get artists like Netspend with Badass Fucking Kid, and you also get projects from artists like Ian with Valedictorian and Goodbye Horses. Albums and artists that feel like they are just catching this very small wave that will eventually peter out, and we probably won't see them again in a couple of years, maybe even a year from now. There's just nothing interesting. There's nothing new to the table. It's just here for the paycheck, here for the short term, but definitely not here for the long term. And especially with Netspend's project, it is so incredibly juvenile. And of course, I know Netspend is like a 5-year-old, but it's just so juvenile. It's so amateur. And the beats, while they are interesting and cool, you could definitely get better production from somebody else. And I think with this collection of artists, they really just don't offer anything. And the more that they crop up, the more that they just bloat up the scene. And I feel like it just makes the Rage sound just worse and worse and worse and worse with each project that is being released in that kind of vein. Okay, so we get to number 5. And not K, what am I doing? Let's erase that really quick. To say that I'm surprised that this is my most popular video is an understatement, but to see on my analytics that it has 4,000 views, that is absolutely insane. I mean, thank you for watching, but why? So, G-Eazy with Freak Show really has kind of put the nail on the coffin of just maybe his career being completely finished. And it's sad because I was an avid fan of G-Eazy all the way back around these things happen. And I had Beautiful and Damned as one of my favorite projects for him. When It's Dark Out does have some really great songs and some awesome moments across it. But to go from that to this, an album that just feels directionless, that feels hollow, and especially towards the back end of this project with songs like Anxiety, it is just an identity crisis in album form, and G-Eazy's just really trying to find his footing somewhere, but he never fully sticks the landing. And I think with that, this is easily his worst project. I do hope that there's some kind of hope at the end of the tunnel, and I hope we get more of a return to basis kind of project. These things happen too. While it wasn't the best project ever, it did give me some classic moments of G-Eazy. This album is definitely not giving it to me much at all. So then we move on to number 4, and kind of falling in the same vein with Freak Show, where it's kind of going into that emo kind of direction. We have Genre Sad Boy. Let's get it right here. There's always that, and then Boy. There we go. So it's MGK and Trippie Redd, both working at the worst of their abilities, the worst of their powers. MGK had Mainstream Sellout. Actually, no, it was Tickets to My Downfall. That was a decent enough attempt at going into this pop punk direction. And then we had Mainstream Sellout that completely just jumped the shark into something that was so much worse and so much more derivative and so much more poor in its execution. And Trippie Redd had Neon Shark, which was the extension of Pegasus, that showed that he could also do this sound as well. But man, with Genre Sad Boy, both of these artists come together and just really, either they phone it in, or they're taking the lyrics either way too seriously, or maybe they're putting these lyrics out to... I really don't know what's going on with this project, but it is such a poor showing. And JID is tied to this project. There's no kind of accredited feature, but I don't know why he's here. And there is a moment towards the end where MGK does bring something somewhat genuine, but it really can't save of how just poor the songwriting is and how poor the songs are. There's nothing really, especially with the instrumentals, that is striking, that is punching. It just feels incredibly empty. And then when you get the empty kind of instrumentals, it makes you focus on the lyrics that much more. And to know that those are really terrible just really raises this album to be one of the worst of this year, easily. So then we get to number 3. Now, what I'll say, at least with most of these projects, these are finished projects that most times don't have any kind of blemishes or anything to them. But with Vultures 2, I almost said 3. I really hope we don't get a second or a third one of this thing. But with Vultures 2, while some parts of this were kind of completed and finished, there is a lot of elements of this project that are not. And even if the bones of this project are a little bit fine-tuned, Kanye still is bringing some terrible performances. He's also not bringing anything interesting lyrically to the table. Ty Dolla $ign can try to save this project as much as he wants, but it's just not working. And you can definitely get better Ty Dolla $ign performances across other features and other projects. I can think of an example. The Raven Lenae album had a Ty Dolla $ign feature, and it is miles better than what you get off of Vultures 2. And we're going to get Bully, I think, some point in the future. I think the Vultures era is done. And I think Kanye should really stick to working on solo projects before possibly going back into collaborative projects, because I think the collaborative nature that these albums have with Vultures and Vultures 2 is really just not working out. Kanye just needs to strip down to the essentials, sit down, and just make a good, simple, solid project. Because with Vultures 2, we are at a point where I could really care less about Kanye projects going forward, which is incredibly sad to even think about. So we jump to number 2. And you may be looking at this edition here and saying, there's no way that Mac and Cheese 5 is worse than a lot of these projects here. And you may be right. Now, what I will say is Mac and Cheese 5 is just another French Montana project with no kind of direction, kind of innovation, or trying to do something different. And also, French Montana is just a really incredibly boring performer, not really bringing much of new flows or any kind of cadences or anything special really to the project to make it even slightly interesting. But the fact that the reason why it's at number 2 is... the reason why this kind of project is notorious now is that there was 10 plus versions of this project released, whether it was slowed, whether it was reversed, whether it was slowed and sped up, chopped and screwed. You had reversed ones, you had a cappella versions. You just had so many versions of this project released. And the way that it bloated up streaming services and the blatant tactics that this album is showing is the worst of the worst when it comes to marketing, pushing your music forward, and trying to get a hit by any means necessary. I remember looking at an artist's discography, trying to find a specific song, and they were featured on Mac and Cheese 5. And the fact that I had to scroll for a good little bit to get to the song that I wanted, because every song was a single and every single version of that song was a single. So I had to go for the slowed version, the sped up version, the reversed version, the acapella version, the nightcore version, the gay version. I had to go through all of those to find a specific song. Let's say, for example, I wanted to listen to Never by JID, a song that came off of the Forever Story. You have to scroll a little bit to get to it. So imagine that he was featured on this project and you have to scroll and scroll and scroll just to get to that specific song. It is a terrible strategy, and I am absolutely disgusted that it happened. And I hope this is a kind of a catalyst of this never happening again, because it is so frustrating. And just to show that I don't think the project was the number one concern here. It was just trying to catch some kind of trend by any means necessary. Even the interludes were reversed a cappella, anything of the sort. Everything about this album was just a gimmick in every sense of the word. But number one, this album is finished. It's mixed correctly. But man, is it the worst thing, not just of the year, not just of the decade, but it is the worst album I may have heard in my entire life. And I can't believe I have to write this terrible album, its name. But Peanut by Lil Dicky is a comedy album that falls flat every second and every step of the way. Jail Part 1, the storytelling track towards the latter end of this project, is so not funny. It's offensive. It's disgusting. It's repulsive. You get these really corny and terrible love songs on this project as well. You get songs that try to sound like many other artists. And I know this was the soundtrack to a TV show, but at least with the TV show, you may have some kind of thing that attaches to it to make the song interesting by itself, or have some kind of element to make the song interesting. But when you strip it apart and you just have the song by itself, it is objectively and just disgustingly terrible. And Professional Rapper was another example where it's just not a great project, but this is such a low that I can't even describe or fathom. And of course, we had songs like Freaky Friday and Earth. There's some songs on here that can go toe to toe with those songs, and those songs are absolutely horrible. Lil Dicky, just stick to making TV shows. Never step foot in the booth ever again. And I'm not going to give any kind of thing to say. It's just like, you can build on something, you can work with this, you can make something more interesting. No. I think the time of being a rapper should be finished, because this is the worst album I've heard possibly ever. So that is my top 10. I got all of my anger out, and it's here. So we can just leave it at that. Now my next video I can focus on is my top 20 albums of the year. So we'll get to something positive soon, but we'll get the negative out of the way. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next list video.